Welcome back. You're still watching The Globe. A court of appeal in Kenya will begin hearing a bid to overturn a High Court ruling that stopped plans to amend the country's constitution from June the 29th. The seven-judge bench will listen to appeals by President Uhuru Kenyatta, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and the Electoral Commission on why they should be allowed to carry out a referendum to review the law. The proposed amendments, popularly known as the Building Bridges Initiative, or BBI, were agreed upon by Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga during a truce that ended a political standoff following the 2017 presidential elections. The review, according to the two, is meant to end a cycle of political violence in the country.
Even before the Court of Appeal began its sittings, Kenyatta made known his displeasure with the ruling that faulted his bid to review the country's 11-year-old constitution during his address on Madaraka Day celebrations on Tuesday. He accused the judiciary of often overstepping its mandate, indicating that the need to amend the constitution was to unite the country and break the cycle of political violence every 5 years.
If the court had subjected its decision to stop BBI to a cost-benefit analysis, in other words, if it had considered the burden of choice, then there are questions the judiciary would have asked. If we indeed were at a constitutional moment, is a decision against BBI a decision in support of the status quo? If BBI were to be stopped, who carries the burden of choice? On whose shoulders will ethnic majoritarianism rest?
He warned that the courts, by continuously breaking the will of the people, risked plunging the country into chaos.
The judiciary would have asked itself another question. Can Kenya truly be a democracy if the people are denied the opportunity to express their sovereign and supreme choice at the ballot box on the basis of elevating technicalities over the overriding objectives of the law? Our constitution, fellow Kenyans, is not a yoke around our necks, but rather it should be a mighty sword that can break the chains that limit all of us as citizens.
The proposed changes seek to create 70 new constituencies as well as create the position of a prime minister. The court in its ruling, however, faulted Kenyatta, saying by seeking to review the constitution, he had failed the integrity test and that any changes to the law should be through parliament or a popular initiative. Sarah Kemani, SABC News in Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, as you've just seen in his first public reaction to the ruling, President Uhuru Kenyatta was telling that crowd celebrating the country's 58 years of independence that the judiciary had once again tested the East African nation's constitutional limit and overstepped its mandate. Well, for more on this, we're now joined via Zoom by Margaret Monyani, who's an analyst on African affairs. Thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you, and good evening to our viewers.
What's your take on President Kenyatta's first comments on what the courts decided last week? He seems pretty angry.
Yeah, indeed, the president, of course, is not happy. And anyone would not be happy if they were in his shoes, because this was going to be a defining moment on his legacy, getting the BBI to go through. At least if you followed the process that started 3 years ago, it was going to be a landmark for him on his legacy. But now it turns out that the High Court was not turned out the BBI. And so in my view is that a court process or matters legal can only be discussed in a courtroom, not in public political rallies. But now he's a politician, he has a right to say whatever he has to say, but you can see the anger. And in that way, you can see some can argue, this president has had issues with the first Chief Justice that was there, Maraga, and now we have a new leadership, and he seems not to be in good books with them. All in all, the court, if you read the ruling, did not dispute the contents of BBI, but it was more on the process. So while he's there to say that the court did not keep in consideration with the will of the people, which is okay, the will of people, of course, is the people are sovereign. But again, the Constitution is also very clear in Article 256, 257 on how to go about the technicalities that he mentions in his speech is the heart of the process. So the will of the people can only be articulated through a certain process that the court had an issue with.
So what is the issue in terms of him then going back and following the process? Is it that he's run out of time?
Of course, there is that aspect of time. Given the Constitution says that any, say, a referendum can only happen a year. He has 12 months here. He has 12 to 13 months. So the best shot we have this referendum by August. So it means then now we have a court, the appellant court now talking of sitting from the 29th of June. Now it's a matter of time and practicality, because it's about this court making a decision on it. What if it gives in? Fine. What if it doesn't? Then it means we do not know, but there is a high possibility that some people might move to the Supreme Court, and that would eat into more time, which means it is less than a year. Then there is very little that can be done. While the Constitution allows for extension of Parliament and President term, that is only under certain circumstances. That is if there is a state of emergency, and we can clearly see BBI is not a state of emergency.
Does he have an argument, though, in terms of saying that he's trying to make sure that there's no post-election violence, which sometimes leads to a loss of life? I mean, if that's the goal, then it's maybe a noble cause.
Well, if you look at the history of violence in Kenya, it's quite embedded in tribalism, which most politics are grounded around that. People go the tribal way, that this tribe will vote for this tribe. And because of that, the minority tribes have always felt left out, because the majority are the ones who end up taking the seats. That is something that cannot just be cured through a legal process. I think there is a lot of civil education that needs to be undertaken so that people appreciate brotherhood, appreciate being patriotic, and it's never about tribes. But because in 2007 there were chaos, of course, after the elections. But then someone asked me once, where in the Constitution did the Constitution say people can go to the streets when they are and kill each other? There was nowhere. So having a legal backing alone is not enough. It's about changing perceptions, leaders making a deliberate move to unite Kenyans.
What do you get the feeling in terms of Kenyans on the ground? Are they behind the president over BBI, or are they saying, no, we're not going to spend taxpayers' money funding more positions, more MPs, and who are already getting paid quite well?
Actually, I've heard the Kenyans right, and the many I've talked to, or the social media accounts that I'm on, and I'm interacting with Kenyans, you can see Kenyans were never behind the BBI from the word go. Because what is the origin of BBI? It was born out of a handshake, and not the need to improve Kenyans' lives or some sort. And then a lot of money has been pumped into what has turned out, at least from the court ruling, to be a shoddy process. Because if you remember, when the court was administering its ruling, it even took time to explain how the Kenyans got the current constitution. It was a rigorous process to explain that then we cannot have a shoddy process to actually have a complete overhaul. Just to mention that from what I've read, the recommendations that were being put forward by BBI were about to change 14 out of the 18 sections of the Constitution. That was going to be like a complete overhaul. So Kenyans, honestly, like right now with COVID, people have lost jobs. people having that, like this year, children are going to school every other 3 or 6 months, 3 months, and they are paying school fees over and over again as they move to the next grades. And it's just too much on the parents, too much on children who are going to school. People are losing lives in hospitals. And actually, some people argue, why use this much money? Why didn't they even use them to equip the hospitals? Why? Because we're having this COVID, of course, people losing life because of COVID and many other issues. So for Kenyans, they don't think this is the real deal right now. Given that, again, there is the argument that the constitution we have is just 10 years old. They would have just made partial amendments through the parliamentary initiative, and it's actually some few parliamentarians are picking that route right now. From 3 days ago, I saw someone in the media saying maybe we should go through parliament. And then people are asking, where were you all along?
Some people might be surprised that, they were once sworn enemies, Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, and yet they are fighting together to get this legislation passed. What's in it for Mr. Odinga?
Of course, they say in politics there are no permanent friends or enemies, but permanent interests. So, yeah, of course, there are arguments. The creation of the Prime Minister's post and all that, there have been arguments that probably that would go for Raila Odinga, or he can now have a chance to maybe contest in that capacity or get that as a gift. Because, so there is that creating posts for the bigwigs who are likely, because if it comes to presidency, there's Odinga has really tried, and there is that fatigue. And some sections of Kenyans feel that probably he should take a retirement, because he's actually older than Uhuru and that kind of dynamic. So, yeah, there is an argument that he could get maybe the Prime Minister's post, but some people say maybe the Prime Minister's post is for Uhuru, who has because of the cap, the 2-term cap, then he will be able to come back.
Would this shift the politics in the country in some way? Because they're talking about 70 extra constituencies and members of parliament. And would this friendship between the parties, the opposition and the ruling party, would that shift the politics of the country, do you think?
Wow, this one, I must say, in my own opinion, was one miscalculated move. 70 more constituencies. We have one of the biggest parliaments in the world, highly paid. We don't need more leaders. We just need a few visionary leaders. That's what Kenyans need, actually. So I don't think there'll be any. The shift is not in the number. The shift is in the real representation and visionary leadership. That people, even if there are 10 or 20 parliamentarians that are they're in the parliament, they're there for the will of the people. They're pushing the interests of the people that elected them. So it's not about the numbers. The more the numbers, as it is, there is the campaign that was there some time back that was dubbed Okoa Kenya, Punguza Mzigo, which means reduce burden, if I translate it directly. So already Kenyans are feeling the pinch of that big parliament. So having more really is actually just a bigger burden to the common mwananchi.
All right, we'll see what the Court of Appeal does. But Margaret, thank you so much indeed. Your insights always greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that's a lecturer in international relations at the University of Wits and an African affairs commentator joining us, talking about what's happening in Kenya. President Uhuru Kenyatta very upset that the courts pushed back his Building Bridges initiative, but he's appealing, and we'll see what the Court of Appeal will do. We're going to